They call themselves the Squeegee Collaborative, a group of Baltimore business and city leaders on a mission to expand opportunities for those on the corners. Dante Johnson is among those who are leading this initiative. He's the general manager over at Hotel Revival in Mount Vernon. He's been hiring former Squeegee workers, but he says that alone won't solve the problem. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you. You've done a lot of work when it comes to the squeegee issue in town. In fact, you're part of the mayor's planning or committee right now that's talking about it. Tell me about that meeting and what you thought came out of it so far, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we had one meeting so far, right?
Okay.
And I think, there's a lot of work to be done. And, so far what we've done is, get to know who's around the room.
Sure.
Started to sort of unpack, what people in the room feel like are the upstream issues that lead to young people being at intersections, squeegeeing windshields.
Yeah.
And so, a lot more conversation to be had. There really isn't a lot to sort of substantively get into in terms of what we've done. I think it's more so about the road to come and the work that's still left to be done.
What's interesting about the work that you've already done is that you've gone to some guys who had been on the corner before and you brought them in. And tell me about the decision to employ them.
I mean, I think that's a decision that I suspect many people in our community would make if given the opportunity. Credit to the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement to create a program that gives a pathway to employment for young people who are disconnected from education, disconnected from what we would view as traditional means of employment, and just spending some time with them in the Mayor's office, getting them as ready as you can in a couple weeks. But I think for us, that decision is knowing that we're participating in a workforce development apparatus. We're not benefiting from it. So you're not delivering someone who after 2 weeks in an office is fully ready to tackle the stress, the strain, the expectations of working in an environment like this when they were squeegeeing windshields 2 weeks ago. So we know that there's going to need to be an extraordinary amount of trust and faith and care that's put into our young people, but I think that's what any group of young people should be able to expect from their community.
And you come into it thinking, or at least knowing that it won't work for everybody.
It won't.
There'll be some guys who that's preferred. Cash in hand every day versus a paycheck every other week.
Listen, I think traditional means of employment are being sort of evaluated like that by the entire labor force. So I think any population of people, this won't work for everybody. And hence the the explosion of the gig economy. Right? There's people who I would just rather drive Uber every day and pick my own hours and roll out of bed when I feel like it than to have to deal with me. Right? And so I get that and I understand it. But I think for us the question becomes, what are the things that young people should be able to expect from a society? And if you're 10, 11, 12 years old, the world should be your oyster. Like there should be no limitations to your imagination. And so I think if you're at that age, pre-teen, pre-high school, and you've already identified that the best opportunity that you see for yourself is to drop out of school or not participate in school on a regular basis and do really hard work, then that already tells me that we haven't delivered on that.
And part of the misnomer is I think some people think that those guys don't want to work.
Right.
Well, I think the point that you're on the corner for 8-hour shows that you want to work. I think that people need to understand that. Like there is an interest.
There is. I think they're clearly hardworking young people. And I think the other thing that we miss is all of the circumstances that surround someone making that decision, right? And in many cases, it's other people that they care for, who they're in the best position to provide in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of cases where you've got 9, 10, 11 people in one household who are all just contributing to a pot that cares for the group. And so, it's a tough thing to think that at, middle school age, you're making sacrifices like that and putting, what would be your future aside and saying, right now in this moment, we have an urgent need. The lights are going to get cut off if I don't go out and squeegee. Or right now in this moment, we have an urgent need. People aren't going to be able to eat if I don't go out and squeegee. I've got younger sisters, brothers, cousins who I'll go out and do that so that they can participate in school and potentially have a brighter future. And so I think in a lot of cases, it's an immense sacrifice that's being made for them to be on that intersection, and I think that's the thing that people miss.
The negative headlines, I think, can speak for themselves. I won't let you go there, so I'll get you to tell me about the positive headline. Where does this end up, do you think, as you have the meetings, as you talk to folks like you who may employ them or may just have ideas? Where are we 10 years from now when I look at the corners on Light Street?
My hope is that we end up in a case where there's fewer young people who feel like they have to make decisions like this. And I think another thing that we should be mindful of is Baltimore does not have a monopoly on underserved young people.
Sure.
Right now, there's kids breakdancing in a subway in New York somewhere. And there's people on their morning commute who hate that. But I think that's also, again, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the community dynamics, and that's how you arrive at that conclusion. My hope is that we're able to do work today that provides more opportunities for a 5 or 6 year old who would be in that pipeline, who now has a broader imagination of what's possible for them.
Sure. The next GM might be a former squeegee worker.
I hope so. I hope so. The next year might be a current squeegee worker.
Yeah.
Right. I think that I'm not giving up on these young people. My belief is that there's still a lot of promise. There's still a lot of opportunity ahead. We just have to make sure that they see the light at the tunnel that we do. And so we've already had people who've in the couple of months that we've been working in this program, who've gone back to school.
Okay.
Right. And so and we've met some incredible young people.
I bet.
I'm the only person you'll talk to, but if you talk to people in the building who've been at the hotel for 2 or 3 years, they'll tell you how amazing these young people have been. But they've also, they've got some stuff going on.
Yeah.
And if we can't see the humanity in that, then I think that says more about us than it says about them.
All right. Dante, good to see you, man.
You as well.
Appreciate the time.
I appreciate it, man.